Well, we're going to do something a little different as we move toward the end of our summit this year. We want to give you a chance to actually make some practical connections and forge partnerships around some of the issues that have been raised over the last 2 days. Before we do that, I want to just take another moment to thank the Shared Value Initiative team, Justin Backley, Stacey Neal, Alicia Dunn, Georgina Hurst, Katie Schlepp, and Stephanie Pasquale for the tremendous job they did putting on this session. Thank you. And we're going to run 4 sessions in this partnership marketplace. There is one session that Pyxera Global, one of our partners, is going to run on how to do partnerships in general. And if you've signed up for that, you're very lucky. It's going to be a great session. If you haven't signed up for it, it's full, so you're not lucky. But we do have 4 great choices for you to choose from. And I'd like to give the people who are leading each of these just a couple minutes to describe what they're going to talk about in their session. So the first one is on post-harvest food loss, and I'd love Sud Habas to stand up and say a few words.
Good afternoon. Not yet. All right. Now? Not yet. I can be loud enough without it if necessary. No, it's on. All right. There you go. Okay. So if you would like to join a session with Pyxera Global anyway, our session is by Pyxera Global as well. I'm not quite as good as Deirdre White, our CEO, but I'm a pretty good second. For our speech or for our session, we are looking at post-harvest loss, and we've talked a little bit in the last couple of days about food insecurity and the effects that had. And this morning, stunting was brought up as one of those issues. And what we have to think about is this something that we just want to grow ourselves out of, produce more, or are there ways to reach the inefficiencies in the market that affect our communities and make it harder for corporations and small companies to make the profits as well? So what we're looking at is building on the Pyxera Global Engagement Forum session and trying to concentrate and continue the conversation on solvable problems, specifically looking at post-harvest loss. What we're looking at is post-harvest loss, not only in the sense of how it's used in the development world, but also at addressing what most of the private sector would look at as processing, production, and distribution. The session is a hands-on collaborative session. We expect you to come up with the problem statement yourself that you can then take on and try to address within your own organization, and also to develop the partnerships through the people in the room and through the other people that might be interested in this topic to try to come up with a solution for the problem that you've identified. So that is our session.
Thank you. And Ramona James doing a session on shared value in insurance.
Okay, good afternoon everybody. Who wants to be happier and healthier? Yes, lots of hands, lots of smiling. I was really interested, the Harvard Grant and Gluck study. Has anyone heard of that? 75-year, the longest longitudinal study in the world, going since World War II. It identified that if you have deep relationships, you're likely to be happier, healthier, and live longer. Now, all of our organisations could benefit from that as well. My hypothesis is that if our organisations have deep relationships, they can also be happier, healthier, and live longer. So, what are we going to do this afternoon? Well, we're going to look at some innovation spaces. So through the Ensuring Shared Value research, we've been looking at what are some of the macro issues that the world is facing, and how do those macro issues play out for the insurance sector. But in doing this work, we've identified that insurance plays such an impact along the entire life cycle of our world that adjacent industries are going to be critical to enable us to tackle those macro issues. So we've identified some innovation themes. So from being able to be at work for longer and do that happier and more well, to being able to age, to live longer and do that healthier and happier, to be able to live in an urban environment and do that safer and healthier, to be able to get through the big disasters that impact on our world, or to be able to have safer rural livelihoods and living. We want to find others other organizations and industries that can play a part in helping us tackle those macro issues. So if you want your organization to be happier, healthier, and live longer, you need to come to the Ensuring Shared Values session.
Thank you, Romana. I can tell this is going to be quite competitive. Our next session is on health solutions with Nirja Bavara from FSG.
Hi, everyone. We are excited to invite you to a session this afternoon on scaling health solutions in low-resource settings, largely in global health settings, but we invite people who are thinking about U.S. health as well to join us. And what we'll be doing is we're going to have 4 ongoing table discussions that people can rotate in and out of on topics that we've heard are key pain points, but ones where companies can have real impact to accelerate progress. So we'll be talking about financing for health solutions, which we know is always kind of our biggest wall that we hit. We'll be talking about digital solutions and how we can harness the power of digital solutions. We will be talking about internal barriers within companies to thinking about shared value, especially in the global health space, and how companies are reorganizing internally to get better at that. And then the 4th thing that we'll talk about is end users and how to really engage and how companies are engaging with end users to actually grow demand for their products and services to make everyone happier and healthier, to borrow from my colleague here. And we'll be talking in those sessions about what's working today, what's not working, what do we actually need to move forward? And I hope everyone in our group will be listening for what's needed to move forward so we can actually make some of those connections that Mark was suggesting. And to quite literally sweeten the pot, since we are getting a little bit competitive, my co-facilitator, Seb from Geneva, our Geneva office, has brought Swiss chocolates. So join us at the Scaling Health Solutions Summit. We may not be healthier, but I think these will make us happier.
Thank you. Thank you, Nirja. And the last session on impact hiring is called Equity and Talent, and Paul Ortega and Nicole Trimble are going to lead that. Good luck after those last two.
I know. But we're here like demonstrating partnership, right? So we came up together. So you guys remember Deshaun Hightower yesterday? Did you fall in love with him as much as I did, I hope? And so what we're talking about is how do our organizations recruit, retain, and advance talent like Deshaun so that we're reducing barriers and creating opportunities, not just for our company, but for young people, refugees, formerly incarcerated people, and others with barriers. And we're so lucky that we have our partner in this work, Swiss Post, here, and Paul's going to talk about a little more.
Sure. So that candy that she held up here, just for the record, we're the Swiss company that made that candy. So,
Oh, and we have candy too. It's not Swiss. Twice as much.
so come to our session, and we'll be sharing with you how it's not just a retail solution. We're an organization that represents literally close to 30 different industries. You'll learn about how we have 48,000 employees, how 12,000 apprentices were onboarded full-time that represent the same demographic as Deshaun. You'll learn how 1,145 young adults became a part of our organization and revolutionized what we're doing as an industry through robotics and so forth. So join us, and we look forward to seeing all of you there.
Great. Thank you, Paul and Nicole. I hadn't realized candy was a theme, but it makes me think of the American poet Ogden Nash, because after these sessions, we're going to have a reception. And it made me think of his brief poem about sort of romance, that candy is dandy, but liquor is quicker. So come join us for the reception afterwards. But before you head off to these exciting partnership marketplace sessions, I want to just take a moment to share a final thought or two with you. Justin, yesterday, early on in this conference, talked about putting out a new narrative and the idea of narrative change. And I just want to come back to that thought for a minute, because What we've come to see is that it's not facts that motivate behavior. It is the stories that are embedded in our society, the stories we grew up with, the societal narratives that we assume are what explains the things that happen around us. And the problem is, so many of those narratives are just wrong. There's a narrative that says, you know, social change is up to nonprofits and government. It's not what companies should be doing. We had a session on refugees yesterday. There's a narrative that says refugees come in and steal jobs and cause terrorism. It's not true. We heard a session at the end of the day yesterday from media about fake news, the narrative that you can't trust news. Not true. We had a wonderful presentation by the CEO of Enel, Francesco Starace, that refutes the idea so well accepted that we can't move to a low-carbon economy, that somehow we can't have electric power and low carbon. We've heard in the session this morning the thought that racial equity is not a business issue, and yet it really is. It really is. So many of these myths pervade our society and affect all of the decisions we make, affect the people we elect to office, affect the policies we endorse, affect the behavior of our companies and the behavior of our shareholders. The myth that tax cuts create prosperity. The myth that short-termism prevents the leaders of our companies from embarking on bold and ambitious strategies. Above all, the myth that there is a trade-off between having a profitable company and having a just and fair society that meets the basic needs of every citizen and every person living there, citizen or not, and that provides opportunity for all. We believe and have seen time and again through the shared value work of our partners, of all of you, that these myths are wrong, that the prosperity of our society, the success of our companies, the wealth of our shareholders depends on our ability to meet human needs, to address issues like climate change, like racial equity. There is this myth, particularly in America, in the US today, that says that the pursuit of prosperity depends on the eradication of compassion. It's not true. And for all of the examples we've presented over the last 2 days, for all of the research in our reports, for all of the data and facts that we assemble, unless we can change these deeply embedded narratives, we cannot change society. We cannot change the companies and organizations that we're a part of. So what I ask each of you to do as you leave this conference, after the sessions on partnership, after the reception, but as you leave this conference, is to think about how you personally can begin to change the narratives that you hear around you, in your workplace, at home, at school, wherever you may be, because we must change these narratives, not only to create shared value and prosperity, but to create the kind of world that all of us want and need to live in. Thank you very much for being part of this session.